sometimes up to 3/4 of all credit reports can contain some type of error. False negative information serves to depress your credit score and increase the costs of your ability to do any type of business. So it's very important if one has false or inaccurate information on their credit report to get that taken care of. So what then attorneys do, consumer attorneys do, is they enter into contingent fee agreements, which enables consumers to not have to pay upfront either the cost of the suit or the attorney's fees that would normally be incurred. The first thing to keep in mind is that credit report accuracy is always up to the consumer. The burden is shifted to the consumer to make sure that everything's correct. Getting your credit report is like giving yourself a credit physical. You should give yourself a credit physical once a year, just like we all should go to the doctor once a year. Everyone has a right to get one free credit report every single year, and you can get them online, or you can download a form off the internet from the FTC. The website is www.annualcreditreport.com. Another thing that's important, and I know I'm guilty of this too in the past, if you get a credit denial, save it. Don't just throw it away. Hold on to it, because that can be some evidence in the future that you might need to show that you were improperly denied credit because of some things in your credit report that were improper. So what do you do when you get your actual credit report? Well, simply put, you review it as closely as possible, because you know more about yourself than anybody else does, and your past and where you've lived, and the credit cards that you've used, the credit cards you've signed up for, all the different lines of credit that you've used over the years, mortgages, etc., etc. So now what you've got to do is go through each negative item as carefully as you possibly can, and then make sure that what they're reporting as negative is actually truthful and accurate. If it isn't, the next thing you do is start amassing your evidence as to why you know that it isn't true. Even when there's negative credit information that is accurate, it is supposed to be obsolete after 7 years from the date of delinquency. So even if it's accurate delinquent debt, it shouldn't be on your credit report after 7 years. You really got to be careful with those, because especially when the debt gets sold to debt collectors, what the debt collectors will do, they'll use a little trick. They'll re-age the debt. They'll change the date of delinquency by a year or two. In the inquiries section of your credit report will list the names of all the entities that have requested your credit report. So there's what's called a hard pull and a soft pull. A hard pull is where a full copy of your credit report was provided to an entity in response to your request for credit, insurance, employment, that type of thing. The hard pulls are seen by people who access your credit report, and they also get factored into your credit score. So the hard pulls lower your score, so it's very important that you know that the folks that have done a hard pull had a legal right, and you had a relationship with them to pull that report, because if they didn't, then they've possibly broken the law. A soft pull is a request for credit information that other people can't see the credit reports they access about you, and they don't affect your credit score. So mistakes on your credit report can involve information that belongs to you but is reported incorrectly, or information that does not belong to you at all. For instance, you may notice that one of your accounts is being reported with the wrong balance or payment history, or it appears that it's open but it's actually closed. Identity theft usually takes one of two forms. The simple kind is, when somebody gets your credit card information on an existing account, charges it. But the truer form of identity theft that gets, pretty crazy sometimes, when an actual thief obtains your personal information, your social security number, other identifying information, and it actually opens new accounts. Oftentimes you won't learn about this until months and months later, when a lot of damage has already occurred. And you might go to buy a car, and all of a sudden your credit score is 100 or 200 points lower than what it normally is at, and that's when you find out, all this has happened. So, what do you do if you're a victim of identity theft? Okay, the first thing you do is you contact each of the main credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, and tell them that you believe you are a victim of identity theft. And they will put a temporary fraud alert on your credit report, and they'll send you a copy of your credit report for free. The next thing to do, and sometimes this can get a little bit tricky because some police departments don't know that they're supposed to allow you to do this, but they should allow you to file a police report. Now, what happens at the office sometimes or over the phone is they'll say, well, where did this happen? And well, it happened on the internet, right? It happened out in the web, but I was a victim in Williamson County, and so that's where it actually happened. So you have to make it clear that that's where you were victimized, and that's why you should be able to file a police report. Now, sometimes they still won't do what you want, so usually you have to actually go down to the station. You go down to the station, talk to a couple people, and then they'll usually do what they're supposed to do and allow you to file a report. If the county won't do it, call the state police. And trust me, somebody's going to do it. So then you get your credit reports. They'll come to you, comb through those, obviously, just like we've been talking about. And then you've got to contact the bureaus and dispute each and every piece of information that's not yours as fast as possible. And another thing, when you send these letters, the dispute letters, they need to be certified. And then make sure you make a log of all your contacts with any authorities, credit bureaus, financial institutions, debt collectors, anyone else you contact regarding your efforts to try to make this go away. Now, also, if any of you have children, you need to review their credit reports as well, because their crooks have been known to use your child's social security numbers, create an entirely new identity, and by the time your child grows up and discovers the fraud, a huge amount of problems have already been occurring, and there's going to be a really big mess. So the quicker you can find out about something like that, the better. You know, TransUnion, Experian, Equifax, we just call them the big three because they're all pretty much equally big. I don't know on a market cap basis or on a revenue basis, they're all gigantic. They all make billions and billions and billions of dollars every year selling out all of our information. And, you know, that's how they make their money. They're not in the make sure everything's right business. They're in the sell everything we can business. So that ends up being why there are a lot of problems. Our next topic will be mixed files. And the most common situation where this happens is within families. You've got a junior and a senior with identical names, and sometimes you might even have a close social security number by chance. But what, you know, the big problem is that, you know, we've got these supercomputers and there's so much information. I mean, we talk about billions and billions of transactions that go on a daily basis. And for whatever reason, stuff gets intermingled. And when somebody else's bad information gets intermingled with your information because your name and maybe you had a close address in the past, or there's some other trigger. You never know what it's going to be. It could be just about anything. But when somebody else's information is reported under your name, then you've got all of a sudden you've got all their problems. So mixed files are a big problem. And the only way you'll ever know is if you do your annual credit physical and look through your stuff, your credit reports, and with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that everything's yours, not somebody else's. So, you know, again, step 1, identify all possible mistakes in your credit reports. Step 2, contact each bureau that is reporting false information. Step 3, once you get the responses back, you need to review it very carefully. If any of the information that you disputed was not removed, you may have a cause of action under the Fair Credit Reporting Act against the credit bureau or the entity that verified the wrong information. A mistake that people often make, though, is they go directly to get the credit report fixed, they go directly to the furnisher first instead of the credit reporting agency. The proper channel is to go to the credit reporting agency first and then get that going. Now, you can still have a fight with the debt collector, don't get me wrong, but as far as Fair Credit Reporting Act goes and the rules and regulations related to it, you've got to go to the credit bureau first. The Fair Credit Reporting Act enables you to recover between $100 and $1,000 per violation. There are also other types of damages, including, you know, if it's a troubling situation that can cause a lot of angst and personal anxiety. Just read an article just recently about a debt collector who was trying to get a consumer to pay the debts of their recently deceased relative. Not their debt, but, you know, they start making the phone calls, doing the harassing, throwing it on that consumer's credit report. It really depends on the extreme of the situation, and then also how you personally, how the consumer personally is affected. So you can have emotional damages. There's also invasion of privacy in the improper credit pull situation. But what also can happen is punitive damages can be in play. I'll give you another hypothetical. Let's say you disputed it twice, they were not fixing it, they refused to fix it, and you're like, wait a minute, I'm trying to buy a house. And you get denied. Okay, so now you've been denied when you otherwise should have received that house, you should have received approval, and the next time, then you finally get it all sorted out, and 6 months later goes by, and interest rates have jumped 1.5 points. Now your damages under the FCRA in that situation are
the interest rates you could have had as opposed to what
That's
you
right.
got when they denied you at the start.
which can be very significant under certain circumstances. If you got a $300,000 mortgage, now you're paying 5.5% instead of 4%, through no fault of your own. But as far as just straight up statutory damages go, it's $100 to $1,000 per violation. It's much better, actually, to contact a consumer attorney if it's complicated, if it's not super straightforward. Just contact a consumer attorney, have that consumer attorney write the letter. Most consumer attorneys will write those letters for free, and then hopefully the problem gets resolved. But if it doesn't, then you've already got your relationship with the consumer attorney. We'll cover illegal debt collection real quick here. There's a completely different act called the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, and there's a whole bunch of rules. But the big thing to think about whenever you're dealing with a debt collector is that they have to treat you with fairness and respect. And if they're not, then there's a good chance that they've broken some rules. There are lots of different rules. So in the category of harassment, they can't contact you early in the before 8 a.m. or after 9 p.m. That's off limits. That's a rule violation. They can't contact you at your workplace if you've told them, don't call me at my work. They can't use abusive, obscene, or profane language. They can't insult or abuse you on the phone. They can call you, but there's a limit there. I mean, there have been some examples of debt collectors calling people 30 times a day, and that now we're into the realm of abuse. They're not legitimately trying to collect a debt. They're trying to abuse you, to force you to pay a debt.
So what about when they try calling you for a family member?
Oh, well, that's completely illegal. Yes, that's another good example, actually. Yeah. Third-party contacts are very limited. Debt collectors cannot call. The classic example is the 19-year-old kid who, defaulted on his credit card, and now Chase Bank has sent that off to XYZ debt collecting company. Now that debt collecting company, they'll call mom and dad. They do it all the time. It's completely illegal. A debt collector also is not allowed to use false or misleading statements. And what happens here is they'll basically just make numbers up. They do it all the time. You might only owe $10,000 under the rules of the original credit card company, plus interest. But then they'll start adding charges that are completely illegitimate collection charges. Next thing you know, $10,000 is $22,000, and they're sending you letters for that. But another example that happens is frequently is that you'll get letters in the mail for debts that aren't yours, or debts that you just really don't understand or recognize. So as a consequence, they have to prove to you that this is your debt. The rules are within 5 days of their initial communication, and that can be oral or in writing. Within 5 days, the debt collector must send you a written notice containing certain information about the debt and your rights to timely obtain verification of that debt. Now then you have 30 days to notify the debt collector in writing of receiving their validation notice that you dispute the debt. And at that point, then they have to turn over all their information and prove up that this is yours, why they believe that this debt is yours. So they have to stop their collection procedures until they prove that it's your debt. But you actually have rights under a final act, and I'll finish up here. The Telephone Consumer Protection Act. Debt collectors often use what's called an automated telephone dialing system, which helps them helps them make calls quicker. They can't use an automated telephone dialing system to make those calls to your cell phone if you haven't given them consent or you've revoked consent. If you initially gave them consent in the course of the paperwork when you signed up for the loan, which pretty much everybody asks for nowadays. XYZ Bank, they'll always say,
Can we call you?
right, and give us your cell phone number or whatever. And of course you do because you're signing up in that one. But then, you've got a friend and your friend's like, oh my gosh, this debt collector has called me 32 times today. They're blowing up my cell phone at work, I'm at the movie, etc., etc. What do I do? Revoke consent. You can do it in writing or you can do it orally, and tell your friend to revoke consent as clearly as possible, which is basically only, do not call my cell phone ever again, ever. And that phone call should be recorded. Your friend should also scribble down some notes at home and explain that on X date I revoke consent with XYZ company. There's two issues there. If it's a marketing call or an informational call that involves an automated telephone dialing system to your cell phone, those are all illegal. Okay? But as a matter of practicality, like the three that I got today, they're coming from overseas. You can't find those folks. They're dust in the wind.